Hello and welcome to New Economic Thinking. I'm here today with Deni Brezhnitz, the Director of Research at the Munk School of Global Affairs at the University of Toronto. Deni, thanks for being with me today.
You're most welcome.
Your main area is the economics of innovation. First of all, what does innovation mean to you in the most general sense?
In the most general sense, when I talk about innovation in my research, I'm talking about innovation that leads to economic growth, which comes all the way, very Schumpeterian way, from the point of invention to the point of actually constantly giving continuously better products and services that people will want to buy, using the same factors of condition, or at least the same prices, okay? So from inventing something to actually constantly making it better. And I think actually the second part might be more important. In the
yes, there is this dichotomy. I was discussing this at the OECD with Andrew Wyckoff, and he draws the distinction between innovation and invention. Usually people tend to conflate the two. You tend to view it more as a spectrum almost. You get the invention and then innovation, a lot of that's diffusion as well.
Right.
And certain countries have been better at at fostering the invention side. Others, arguably, such as Japan in the 70s and 80s, were better at on the diffusion side. Although I'm not sure you can make that distinction as readily anymore.
Well, I would say that it's A, it's correct, and B, it might be on a very interesting, ironic way, even more important than before. Because what we see now is, if you look at the globalization, one of the most important things is what we call the fragmentation of production. So for example, if you have an iPhone, you would see, right, design in California, assembled or made in China. Actually, it will follow all the parts, it's made all over. And what you will see, therefore, that the countries specialize not even in industries, but in specific stages of those industries. And what most people do not realize, that in order to be successful over time in those different stages, you have to be innovative. But you have to be innovative in different ways. So if you look at semiconductors, the US and Israel brings ideas, put them on silicon. But then in order to make that silicon, they send it to Taiwan, to TSMC and UMC. And then it gets assembled into products and get re-engineered in other places. And each of those places have to constantly innovate to be the best in what it does. And that means actually that you should have different innovation policies if you're at different countries, depending on where you want to play in the global production networks.
I want to follow up on that a little bit. Every single government in the world talks about the need to innovate, foster. I mean, it's considered to be an unalloyed no-brainer. And in your opinion, which countries, if any, do innovation well, and why is that the case?
I would say that there are several countries, and I'll give you examples, that do innovation well. They do it because they understand that it does not mean the same thing, and what they do very well is very different. The worst mistake that anyone can do is to claim that they want to have Silicon Valley. Even the US, outside of Silicon Valley, probably cannot have another Silicon Valley. It can have a very successful, innovative industry, but it will definitely find it extremely difficult to replicate Silicon Valley with its 60 years of very specific history. What countries that have been played this game very well are examples of Finland, Israel, Korea, Taiwan, and now China. And if you look at each one of them looked at specific slices of activities, focused, sometimes without understanding what they're doing, focused on those activities, and created institutions, education systems, rules of a game, financial institutions that allow companies and entrepreneurs to create companies and grow them in that stage.
So the state clearly played a big role. Those that grew up in around 1980 think that is a non-starter, but I think historically, as you pointed out, and globally, there are many examples where the state plays an absolutely essential role. It's been a key insight of people like yourselves, Bill Janeway, etc. What seems to be a defining feature, though, is that, as you say, they provide the resources, the education. Do they actually pick winners? Because one of the arguments that you hear in the United States, for example, is that you don't want the state involved because you don't want the government involved in picking winners. That should be left to the market.
Well, depending how you define picking winners, right? But the state in all of those cases, including the United States, as Bill Janaway, Linda Weiss, and others have shown, played much greater roles in deciding which technologies are going to be pursued and pursuing them over 40 or 50 years to the level that then entrepreneurs can make money out of them within 3 or 4 years. And if we forget that, we cannot understand Silicon Valley. However, in other places where you are not the United States and you're an emerging economy, without the state playing an active role, not necessarily in picking winners, but in incentivize people to take risk, in giving them the financial ability to take risk, like R&D grants, and by supplying them sometimes with connection to the markets, American markets until very recently, the state enabled and stimulated entrepreneurs to look for opportunities in specific technologies. So they didn't say, Marshall, I'm picking you. But they did say, we need to have novel product innovation. And if you come up with an idea in that industry, we will give you enough money that the risk is feasible for you. Even if you fail, your family will not end up in abject poverty for the next 3 generations.
And that's an interesting point because, of course, a lot of people say that you need to have this, allow people to fail if the innovation is to be successful. But what you seem to be suggesting is that, in fact, the state providing a safety net in many respects frees up the individual to stop worrying about the anxiety of failing and gives him the ability, the entrepreneur, the ability to be more creative with the comfort knowing that there is a backstop behind him.
I would say that it lowers the risk to an acceptable level. It's not that it diminishes the risk to 0 because then people don't care. But there's a major difference between knowing that you're betting an extremely high risk business, which is high tech or any innovation based, and if you lose, your family is gone forever without health benefits or anything, and your house is gone, all the rest, you're already in debt. Or if you lose, you will suffer, you'll be poorer, but life will go on, you'll probably find a different job, there's even a chance that you can start a new company. And in societies that are not the US and in developing society, the only actor that can make this happen and give enough capital, even just money, to entrepreneurs to lower that risk to an acceptable social level is a state, period.
And the state, and the notion of applying a cost-benefit analysis in regard to the state is a bit ludicrous. It is, after all, the issue of currency and in theory has unlimited financial resources. So, and yet we ascribe a cost-benefit analysis in order to justify them not having a role, even though people like Andy Grove, for example, of Intel, have said that it's absolutely ludicrous to apply this cost-benefit analysis to state involvement in innovation.
I would prefer the way that the first chief scientist of Israel, Yaakov Yitzchak, Yatza, who created many of the programs that started to move Israel in that direction, said to me when I interviewed him many years ago. He said, look, from the national point of view, R&D is never lost. It's like an old soldiers. It just keep on going on. So that company go bankrupt, all the knowledge and the people stays within the ecosystem. And if you make sure that you can redeploy them, in the end of the day, 10, 15, 20 years, and the state can look 20 years, from the national point of view, it's a win-win.
I'd like to go back to a point you made earlier about Silicon Valley. I mean, it's somewhat controversial, the idea that we shouldn't be creating a multiplicity of Silicon Valleys around the world, because there are a number of countries that I think implicitly have that Silicon Valley model and want to create. I mean, you have Silicon Fen in Cambridge, for example, and to some extent, I think in Israel, they've tried to create something similar. Why do you think that that's not a good model, and why is it likely to be problematic for Silicon Valley going forward?
So first of all, while Silicon Valley is extremely successful, and I can see why people would like to have it, let's not forget that it has some downsides. One of the major downsides, it's a winners-takes-all game, which is extremely skill-biased. So the people who already have high skill, who are already well off, are the only players in the game. And what you have is, the people who wins and become billionaires, and the people who don't have enough money and live in a car, to exaggerate. But that's basically the model that you say, if you want a Silicon Valley based on high-tech and venture capital. The second, and more importantly, is that the ability of anyone to move to have the whole ecosystem, which is Silicon Valley, in the way that Silicon Valley work, including the VCs, including the knowledge, including the pool. Just remember that many of entrepreneurs, maybe even the majority of entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, were not born in Silicon Valley, would come and play this game and would grow their companies even if they start them in Silicon Fen, will actually grow their companies in Silicon Fen, is very low. Add to that we're talking about American financial markets, American regulations and all the rest. That does not necessarily fit other institutional systems in society. Last but not least, unlike the past, where Silicon Valley was really Silicon Valley, actually has something to do with silicon and manufacturing, that's gone. So even if you succeed in creating Silicon Valley, it is not clear that you will create a large number of jobs and a lot of local growth. And many of the places that bet on that not in order to create a cusp of few extremely successful companies. They think it will create equitable national growth. Even if you succeed in having a Silicon Valley, don't expect that to happen.
You mention the concept of equitable growth, which of course implies that in addition to the great benefits that innovation brings, there are distributive consequences, there are winners and losers. And in fact, you've recently done some work which suggests that policies that have been pursued in order to advance the cause of innovation have actually exacerbated inequality. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. So we already know for the works of others that there is side effects to innovation, and under certain conditions, which are very high at the moment, innovation might lead to a lot of inequality. Skill-based technical change, the fact that I just mentioned, globalization. So even if you and I innovate on the invention side in the US and create a company, we will not start a production facilities in the US. And as a matter of fact, most of the jobs, not necessarily most of the money, will happen elsewhere, right? And the last is, as we talked about, is a financial system. If we start a company as startup, will look for financial exits for our investors, which by definition means that a few of us, if we are successful, will be millionaires or even billionaires, and the rest. But this does not, by the way, is not a natural trend of innovation. Sorry, and the last thing is that innovation, by definition, change the way jobs are being made. And a lot of people that had specific kinds of jobs no longer will have them in the future. They're gone. They will be replaced by machines. The whole idea of productivity growth means that you need less people to do more. All of those, if you don't take them into account, you might have innovation policies that augment all of them, make it even higher, make it even more skill-based technical change, make it even higher chances that the technologies you'll try to develop will be labor displacing instead of labor inducing, meaning making people more productive instead of trying to replace them altogether. And what we have not seen is any thinking about this. Even worse, when we talk about equality, we usually talk about redistribution. So we wait until the game is played, and they said, oh, here are a few losers, let's compensate them. I think we reached the limit of being able to use taxes to...
And in fact, in this paper, you suggest that there are other less traditional means that one can deploy to mitigate the problem of inequality.
Sure. So my first things that I've really done in life was start a software company. Very quickly, it was discovered that I'm a horrible software programmer. So I moved to the management.
Those that can't do, teach, and that sort of thing. You're an example. I've just antagonized virtually every single person that works at our institute, but never mind.
It's actually, I think, differently. I think those who cannot do become managers.
Okay.
Those who really can't do anything else, we just manage our people. It turns out that some people are very good at that, however. In any case, then you realized something about design of growth. If you do not design your growth and products properly, it takes so much more time and effort to actually fix them in the end. So one of the things we can do is think about how our growth-inducing policies, and innovation is, as you said, the major one, actually impact inequality, especially equality of opportunity, and then devise effective, because we need this growth, effective growth policies that actually at least not create more inequality, hopefully actually help to alleviate some of inequality.
And how do we do that?
So we suggested, it's myself and my co-author, Amos Zahavi from the University of Tel Aviv, that one of the things we can do is think about distributive, sensitive innovation policies and look at the things, all those things that I mentioned, that why innovation might increase inequality, and think about innovation policies that might actually fix that or alleviate that. So innovation policies for traditional industries that might increase productivity, but in a way that actually use human beings instead of replacing human beings. Thinking about disadvantaged minorities and how you can engage them with innovation-based industries. Thinking about innovations that can help the disadvantaged, like the disabled, but actually then can make them part of, have a normal daily life, instead of giving them money so they can hire somebody else who can do the chores for them. Those kinds of works, or if you think about regions, right? One of the problem as Americans we know is, yes, we have Silicon Valley on the other side, and on the other side we have Appalachia, right? Can we think about innovation policies that will actually create growth in different regions of the countries instead of tax transfer from different regions of the tax?
So a more of a growth-oriented focus to try to capture those disadvantaged losers in the innovation landscape and get them adopt a more inclusive policy as opposed to just punishing success as by redistribution. Again, that's a caricature, but that's often the way it's described.
So not just punishing, but if we truly believe in equality of opportunity, and I think that every democracy, especially the US, but not only, all the democracies truly believe in equality of opportunity, not necessarily equality of outcomes. We have to ensure that you have equality of opportunities and growth-oriented policies, especially innovation policies, if devised properly, can help us that. Even better, if you fix that, you have less of a problem for redistribution later.
That's a very optimistic take. I hope that some of your ideas are embraced by our governments because I think it's a very important area that has been neglected, certainly by the champions of people like in Silicon Valley. Deni, Presidents, thank you very much for joining me this morning. As always, your insights are greatly appreciated.
Thank you so much, Marshall, and thank you for having me in this beautiful place.
It's a pleasure.